Welcome to the Root of It All podcast with Tree, where you will learn new habits for human betterment. We talk about all things related to personal growth, and everything is on the table. Each episode will explore different topics like self-care, mindfulness, goal setting, and more, with a focus on practical tips and actionable advice you can start implementing in your life today. Our goal is to help you become the best version of yourself and live a more meaningful life. So grab a drink, cozy up, take your dog for a walk, or go for a drive. Join us for some fun and meaningful conversations with some amazing humans. Let's grow together. All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Root of It All podcast with Tree. And today I have an amazing special guest. I've been to a whole bunch of her talks, and she said yes to this podcast, so I'm so blessed. We have Julie Cole from Mabel's Labels, and so welcome. Thank you for your time. Right?
Oh,
Your
Tree, thanks for inviting me. And I love that, like, we've been in this shared space before and that we actually live in the same town, which is wild. So thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, and there's so many great things about you. Like seeing you talk, and just as I mentioned, as a human behavior expert, there's so many things that I see how it is that you operate, and I hope that you like know all this about yourself. Just
You're making me nervous, Tree. You
I,
must make people nervous.
I
You
do.
must.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah.
got to be a thing.
Well,
Occupational hazard.
well, but I also make them really relaxed too, because as a hypnotist, I know how to get people into a really deep, relaxed state. So it's kind of like it is a cool job, gotta say. Um,
Yeah.
but it's for the better good of humans, yes.
And I must say that you do have sort of a calming, like I feel calm with you, like your voice or something about you, like you bring calm energy to the place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do get that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and it's interesting because with you, you also do it the same thing, but in a different way. Right?
Right.
Like you allow people's nervous system to quieten, or if that's a word, but to soften, to relax, because you're sharing your stories. You're making things so much more real for people. And all of a sudden, from a nervous system perspective, it's like, oh, it's okay, right? You
Interesting.
get
And it
people,
also shows that there's more than one way of doing things, right?
you
With the
got it.
same, you can get to the same end, the same result, but different paths.
Yep,
Yeah.
100%. And I
Okay.
love your comedic undertone too, the way that you um because comedy also makes the nervous system relax as well, which is very
Makes
cool. So,
sense.
and so I want you to teach people about how it is, like this two-part question. One, the resiliency of all kinds of stuff, and you can share examples if you want. And then two, it's really the resiliency around either fear or even exhaustion at some points, right? Like the
Right.
amount of kids that you have and like all the
Yeah.
things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I like to sort of preface it with, like when we look at resiliency, I feel like in a lot of ways, maybe there's been a little bit of privilege as well. And I just want to say that because I feel, when people were like, wow, you really have an appetite for risk. I mean, you left the world of legal to start a business in a basement with co-founders. And like that was very, very risky. And I appreciate that. But at the same time, I do feel like that kind of came from a place of privilege in that, I had an education. I was raised by parents who instilled confidence in me. I had a partner who had a good job. So it would, and I just feel like sometimes when people say I'm so brave, I'm like, hold on. I see a lot of women out there who are like single moms with 2 jobs and a side hustle. And I'm like, they're really brave. So I don't want to downplay that I've done some cool things and, created something special. But at the same time, I think when we look at the resiliency scale, I feel like, I'm not at the top of it because of some of the kind of things that I had going for me. And that's what we mean by privilege. So I do like to kind of preface it with that. But certainly I think a lot of when we speak to resiliency, a lot of it too, I think, is sort of personality.
I
When
agree with
people,
that.
like people will be like, oh my gosh, I can't even manage my own 2 kids. I'm like, well, 2 kids is a lot. Or if they say I only have 2 kids, I'm like, 2 kids is a lot. One kid is a lot. Like it's all a lot. And like you talk about nervous system, and I don't really know a whole lot about that. But I feel like, if your nervous system can only take on so much, like I would say don't have 6 kids and start a business, right? Like we
Mhm.
all, and maybe, I mean, you can tell me about this actually. Like, does everyone have a different, like with your nervous system, does everybody have sort of a different level or kind of capability of like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like, are
I know
some people like
exactly.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe my nervous system just is a little more regulated or not regulated. I don't know. What would it be?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a great question. And
Okay.
the answer, or the hard and fast answer, is absolutely, right? Because
Yeah.
all of us as human beings, we've been through all kinds of different things. And I'm gonna loop back to just sort of the privilege, right? So
Yeah. Okay.
what you're calling privilege is having great parents or having an education. Where for me, I would actually say, like, because I didn't have, like, I have an education, but not, I'm not a lawyer, right? Like, um but I feel like my privilege was all of the things that I sort of had to navigate through life. Like, I actually didn't have great parents, right?
Right.
I actually, so if I were to say, oh, privilege, well, I can either choose to be pissed off because the parents there, or let's just say the people that were supposed to show up for me growing up didn't. But I was privileged through having friends that had great parents. I was privileged through maybe the perspective in which I chose to view that, right?
I love that. Oh, yeah.
So when we talk about the nervous system, is we can indulge maybe emotions that we have, or we can and that is unuseful, right? So you don't indulge unuseful emotions, right? And so that's very similar how you and I operate and our nervous system operates. Where, to answer your question, lots of people haven't had that experience because they may have grown up with parents that helped them indulge the emotion. So
Right.
so they just learned that, oh, okay, it's okay to do this because I get attention. So it's not a conscious thing. And this is a really cool conversation. I didn't and everyone I talk with, it just, I let it go. I leave it to the universe to see how it goes. So this is very cool for people to learn how it is that they can actually get out of indulging emotions, because when you see what your privilege is, because I believe that everybody is privileged in some way, shape, or form, and it's about viewing it in that way, right? If we are
Right.
choosing to play a victim, then we're not looking at what privileges we can have. And some circumstances, obviously they suck, and I get
Mhm.
it. Like, everybody's been through some sort of shit show,
Yeah, sure.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's kind of really persevering in the direction in which we want to persevere. So what made you want to persevere? Like,
So yeah, like I love how you say that because in a way, it's not like, believe me, life was not handed on a platter to me. But, I think of the way you interpret privilege was really meaningful to me because like I think about like my parents didn't pay for me, like I always worked in the summer so I could pay for university and I could pay for, or I worked as like a dawn in the residence so that I could get free room and board, like,
yeah.
all those. But I actually saw those things as privilege because they really helped shape me. Like
Mhm.
all these experiences where I had to work for things shaped me. They made me appreciate things. They made me work harder. And it's like my own teenagers. I love them having jobs where they're like, flipping burgers because it makes them realize that, you know what, maybe I want to stay in school. Maybe I want to think twice before buying that pair of sneakers because that actually is like 10 hours work. Maybe they have to work with some coworkers that aren't great, which is like a life lesson, or a boss who's crummy, which is going to happen. And so they get to like kind of learn those problem solving skills while they're young. And I always say today's problem solvers are tomorrow's leaders, right? So I
Yep.
like them to have the practice now so that I'm not solving their problems later. So that's something you could be like, oh, I have a crummy job, but that can be, you can turn that into a privilege. And I think that's what you've done, Tree, by, what you said, and I've done to a certain extent as well.
And that actually answers the question that I asked. So if we're trying to teach people how to leverage themselves and how they are, maybe what sort of job could they get into to get to the next thing that they want to do? Right? Like what sort of thing, what sort of skills can they learn through maybe volunteering or a job or
Yeah,
reaching out to somebody as opposed to indulging in emotion and feeling sorry for themselves, to
right.
actually be curious of who it is that they can talk to learn skills or just learn about an
Yep.
industry. So who
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
Also, I think you said something really important there too, like when you were talking about choosing how to see things. Like I think about, you said, well, I can either, be a victim and dwell on it, but how does that move you forward? Well, it doesn't. And you see that people be like, well, my life is sucks because my parents sucked and everybody sucked and blah, blah. Well, how is that helping you? And I think about a friend of mine who, her like she had a pretty rough, like a very rough childhood. And she has an incredible adulthood. And she has said, like, she was always smart. She had that. She always picked good friends. She always was very intentional about the people she surrounded herself, even as a small child. So she made some pretty good choices. And she thought, well, what good is it to me if I just, rely on my excuse, which is my family sucked or I had nothing. I had nothing. Like, and she had nothing. And now, she's a PhD. But because, what would be the point of that? That doesn't make her life any better to blame somebody else or to just kind of dwell on that. So she did the work and she did the healing, right? And I think that's so much respect for that, right? Because it is easy to be like, oh, poor me. And how does that help you? How does that move you forward? How does it, especially if you're parenting, how does that role model to your children, right? So, and I
Yeah.
always think this parenting thing is a role modeling gig. But I do think, yeah, like having your kids do those tough jobs, not giving them, the easy way. I mean, failure can be a gift, right? Like making them
Yeah.
work for things, and again, getting that practice now so that they know how to deal with the failure later. I think, yes, volunteering, because they're going to learn through volunteerism that it's a gift to you. And I do think sort of any job they do
Mhm.
is good in that they're going to take lessons. Because I've had people say to me, Julie, oh my God, you went to law school, you worked for blah, 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 and now you made labels in a basement. Does it feel like a waste? And I'm like, I can admit, there were times where I'm like, I've been changing diapers for 12 years. Did I really need to sit through corporations law? Right. But I think all of our experience shape where we are now, and we take skills with that. I think about learning how to mediate helps raising these 6 kids and these teenagers have pretty good negotiation skills. I needed a degree in that. So I think we should never look at any of our schooling, any of our experiences as a waste. I think what we should do is pull out the nuggets we got from them and take them on our journey forward.
Oh, 100%. And to just piggyback on that, like one thing that we always say in neurolinguistics is there's no such thing as failure, there's only feedback.
Yeah.
So when we're learning, like if it so it's not failure, it's literally we're looking at, oh, okay, how could I do that better? So we're giving feedback to self or even looking at feedback for others, right? And or from others, the people that we trust. And it's not about sort of just telling everybody and getting sort of 2 cents from everybody, then that's just going to put somebody into overwhelm. It's more strategically picking your peeps and knowing the
Yeah.
people that may have been through similar things or looking for guidance from somebody that you admire or want to be like or see as a role model and stuff like that. So who is your role models?
Oh yeah, many of those. And I like what you say about failure, like because I always think from an entrepreneurial lens, you know, there's no failure, only lessons. And to me, the only failure would be is if you don't learn from it, like if you keep repeating the same mistakes, if you don't take, because it is a gift to take forward and use. And that's why you get serial entrepreneurs. They'll have a business that fails, but they've learned a lot of lessons that they can bring to their next, to their next business, and then turn things around. So it's really only failure if you haven't learned anything from it. Um, as far as role models, I mean, there's been many. I do tend to, you have to see it to be it. I do look at women. I do look at women entrepreneurs. Look at women leaders, and I look at women family members. Like, honestly, my biggest role model was my grandmother. She lived to 101. She was one of 21 kids out of Ireland. And like what
You
she
say
lived through.
21?
I know my great granny had 21 kids. It's ridiculous. And um, I was actually just telling this story about her, and I need to remember to share it a little bit more. I had one of the cousins came out as gay when grandma was about 88. Here's this old Irish Catholic woman, and he was living overseas, and he wrote to grandma and said, I have to tell you something. And, she wrote back to him and said, "Oh, honey, a life in hiding is a life unlived." And I just think that that applies to all of us, like we need to take up more space. We need to, like, I think she was saying that to everyone. And particularly, she did do it with her women. Like when we won the Women Entrepreneur of Canada Award, she was in that limo. She was going to, she's like, my girls, because she was really like a feminist ahead of her, like before her time. Like she was a wonderful mother. She raised a lot of kids, but she did understand that sometimes, it was just boring and banal and it wasn't very stimulating. And, I think she was good for being able to admit it because that's something that we all struggle with. And then we feel like we're bad moms. We're like, oh my God, if I read The Hungry Caterpillar one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. Right. Or like, how many times can I push this kid on a swing? It does get boring sometimes. And, I think she really honored the fact that you can be an excellent mother while also understanding that we need stimulation, we need friendship, we need things on the outside to also fill our cup and not to feel guilty for that.
And so I love this story. So I have a few questions. What year was she born?
She was born in 1916.
So imagine all the things that she would have
I
experienced.
know.
Like,
It's
it's like,
wild. Over 101 years. And you know what? And
yeah.
she always went with it. Cause I remember when I had babies and I was like, Grandma, do you think it's, ridiculous that our kids like, have all this like tech or they all go to ballet and hockey? And she's like, absolutely not. I think it's wonderful. I see stimulated kids. My kids sat around bored just playing with a box and crying more. The kids are so stimulated and they're so smart now. So she always just rolled with it. Like she was never came from that judgy perspective. She was like, look at the benefits for kids today that they have these experiences. And I was like, interesting, because usually that generation is like, oh, well, I turned out fine, or my kids are fine. And honestly, I always say, if you say that, then you probably didn't turn out fine.
Well, and the interesting thing is that I love whenever I'm at any kind of function or anything at all, if I see like somebody that is an older generation and I'm talking like 80 plus, I'll
Sure.
always sit my butt beside them because I am
Yeah.
so curious about, what their experiences were and what their thoughts are. Like um on Canada Day, we were having fireworks just out in this like backfield here. And there's all of like it's a neighborhood thing, and neighbors across the street, they had family over. So again, I sat right beside like the oldest group and the most wisest person in the group, right?
Yeah.
And this guy, he had his cell phone out taking pictures of like the fireworks and everything. And I was thinking like he was actually like 82 years old. And he looked great. I honestly didn't think that he was I thought he was literally like 62 or something like that. And
Right.
but so I was just, and he was from I think Guyana or something like that. So just the stories that he
Yeah.
had about growing up in Guyana like
Right.
that many years ago, that and I love talking to people because us, like our brain, how it works, that we're if we're just experiencing kind of what it is that we're experiencing in that moment, in that day, where when we're talking to people that lived in a completely different country in a different time, it's planting seeds of possibility of how it is that we can persevere and bringing our imagination to possibility. And that's the great thing that I really love about you is the whole possibility. Like even all the stories when you're public speaking and you're talking about how you navigated all your kids and how you navigated the business and building this company. And it was really this perseverance of seeing sort of this bigger picture and going towards possibility. Well, if this is happening, and it's a solution based kind of thing, and solutions come from possibility and curiosity. right? Like
Right.
it's like if we're in, how does the saying go? Uh, if we can't, we must.
Right.
So,
Right.
what would you say? So, what would you say is the biggest thing that you were kind of like that you were in fear, but you were like, I was gonna say the F word, but screw
Yeah.
it, screw it,
But
I'm doing it
yeah.
anyways.
Yeah, look, I think, I mean, part of this, which is, of why I went from, traditional workforce to entrepreneurship was I wanted some flexibility because my eldest child was diagnosed with autism. And that was probably like for me, the biggest sort of, okay, yeah, like if what was you say? If we can't, we must. And it was like, the diagnosis came and I had a
Mhm.
minute of denial and then I had, a day or two of grief. And then I'm like, okay, here we go. This is our new reality. From now on, this kid comes first. These are the programs we need to do. I'm on research mode. I'm putting Team Mac together. Everyone in our family has required reading. Everybody gets trained in ABA. Everybody knows what's on his program. Nobody lets them just sit and line up blocks, like all of the stuff. And that was just my like, what's the alternative? Like we have to move forward and do the best we can for this little fella. And so that was probably my big that life-changing sort of, this isn't how things were supposed to go. This wasn't the plan. But you know what? We're flexible and when you love your humans, you do these things. And yeah, so that was probably the big shift. And of course, with the business, there's always like highs and lows, but the one thing I can control, the only thing I can control is my perspective. The only thing I can do is be like, okay, what kind of attitude am I going to have as I approach this? What can I control? And that's me, like I can complain and whine about it, or I can be like, right, let's find a solution. Let's be proactive. That's completely up to me. So I just choose to do the latter. I try to problem solve it. And I'm not like that sickly sweet, toxic positivity guy at all, but I don't have time to waste. I have a lot to get done, and I can't let negativity or sort of that not being proactive or not being productive kind of be taking up my valuable brain space and living rent free up there because I have to get too much done.
Yeah, and that's such a great perspective that people, if you're listening to this, to model that off of Julie, because wow, that's such a great way to view. Like, so if you're looking at something in a certain way, so you did look after yourself emotionally first with a little bit of grieving at the beginning, but
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I'm good, let's do this.
Yeah.
And that's a good strategy and pattern for a business owner, right?
Yeah.
Because every single business owner, they can be excited about something and not everything works out. So
Right.
if we stay in this negative thing for too long, all of a sudden other opportunities will pass by. Go ahead.
Yeah. And it does feel like when you have that negative mindset, it becomes a habit, right? So
Yeah.
I've got this one really good friend, and it's wild how we interpret things differently. And I've challenged her to like, okay, I want you to try. Like, we can read the same email, and she'll be like, see how they said this? And I'm like, wow, interesting take. I saw it like this. And it's the very same thing, but if there's a negative way it can be taken, that's how she'll interpret it. And if there's a positive way it can be interpreted, I don't even see the negative, or if I do, I'll be like, that's not what they meant. They meant
Yeah.
this. And I always go with that. And she's like, I got to practice doing that because she will always go to the negative.
Well, and it's interesting because I was just training, doing a training for a dermatology clinic, and about 25 to 35% of the staff looked at it from the perspective, like your friend, of what's wrong with it,
Right.
right? So it's just a nervous system thing, and these are called like meta models and NLP, and not to get too technical, um,
Okay.
but basically people can look at things of, oh, what's wrong with it? And then the other 50% of humans look at, oh, what's good about it? And the
Right.
people that look at the things like, oh, what's good about it, they end up in a little bit of more disappointment. because they're always looking for the good, and then certain things don't happen. Not to say that
Ah,
people stay in the disappointment, right? The people that look for what's not good with it, that they don't get into disappointment because they're already sort of down that line,
right,
but they miss out on opportunities because they're that way. So
right.
a good way, and I'm actually the same as you. I always go this side.
Yeah.
So I always check in, okay, and then I'll always kind of just delve into this side for a moment, and then
And then it overrides. The other one overrides,
right,
right?
but just
Yeah.
so that I'm not like overly excited, to manage the expectation of what's happening. And it's a common thing. And
Yeah.
we're just like, being a business owner, I always make sure that I have people that work for me are on the side, and then I teach them, just like you were teaching your friend, to have the flexibility to go on both sides. And
Yeah.
but also too, when it comes to emails, so the interesting thing about emails and text message, that is our least way of how to communicate, because
Yeah.
it's the last thing that was created for us as humans when it comes to communication, right? And so
Right.
it's not our natural state per se. So our natural state is emotions. We're in an emotion every moment of every single day. So when we get a text or an email, whatever emotion we're in, that's how we're reading it.
Right. Because you can't read tone,
No, no,
right? Like you don't get tone
no.
in a text.
No, and it's so
Yeah.
funny too, because even if someone has known someone for 20 years, like someone that's known you for 20 years knows that every text you send out is like happy, happy, joy, joy, right?
Mhm.
Or it could be sarcastic, right? Like
Right.
I love your little sarcastic little undertones. It's so relatable. Um, and so it's interesting that it'll take somebody like a stutter step to be like, oh no, she means this, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, so yeah, so anyone listening to this, I encourage you to be curious to where you land on this. Like, are you looking at what's wrong with things, or are you the positive thing? So,
Yeah.
so the next thing I want to ask you, which I think is really, really important, and which I know that you've spoken about many things, but I'm kind of going to ask it to you in another way.
Okay.
Um, so my face is all going red. I have like these lights. Can you see that?
Oh, you're all right. Yeah, for anybody, if you're seeing this, I came right from the gym, but it was either, do the podcast with Tree and look a little sweaty or not get to the gym at all. So I went to the gym and you have to suffer through it. Sorry, friends.
No,
Yeah,
but I say right on, man, because
gotta
you're
fit the things in.
well, and I
Yeah.
totally encourage that. And everyone should also model that from you as well, to make sure that you're doing what you need to do, right? And we should all do that. I think people sacrifice themselves too much, because going to the gym is so important. And and this piggybacks onto this question. So where do you find your stillness? Like, where do you find like, where you can like plug in and recharge?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm gonna say probably my requirement to do that is not as high as most people.
Hmm.
If that's possible. If I'm wrong, Tree, you tell me. Again, I think people have different tolerance levels. Like, and even it can be like an introvert extrovert thing. Like,
Yeah.
my sister's an introvert. She comes to my house. She's like, I'm going to need 3 days to recover because not only like is it a loud, busy house with friends that pop in, and she's like, it's not just you. And she lives alone, right? Like, and she's like, whoa. So it's exhausting for her just to be around all this like activity, whereas I thrive in it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Like I actually find like this relaxing. Like I love talking to you. Like these are
Yeah.
things that maybe aren't traditional sort of downtime or me time, but I love my work. I love what I do. I like humans. So this sort of thing, it does feel like not work for me. Now it can get exhausting. Absolutely. If I have like speaking engagement after speaking engagement, I just got back from the Mom 2 summit in Orlando. I got to fly. I got an early flight to New York tomorrow morning. Of course I get exhausted. But I'm good at like sleeping on planes.
Yeah.
But I will say to the exercise thing, I have gotten good at that. And it's something that I like make sure I carve out time for because I know that in the end it makes me feel better. And I am dealing with the shit show that is menopause. And it's really helping me with that. And
Yeah.
I've even taken up something that makes me very uncomfortable. And hurts a lot and it's hot yoga. And I know it's supposed to be all zen and peaceful, but I always just crash on my mat afterwards and say, that was too hard. Or why do I find this harder than the average person? But I do know that it's good for me because I do feel good afterwards, even
Yeah.
during it. And it is, but it's something that I know people go to get all zen. And I do it because I know it's good for me in the long run, both physically and mentally. But
Yeah.
in the moments when I'm sweating in 100 degrees and I'm like, why, what? And then the other thing that's hard about hot yoga for me, because I like to be highly productive, is like if I have good hair, then I have to start over. So I'll be
Uh-huh.
like, okay, no, I had my hair done. So I can't do hot yoga for a few days because I don't want to ruin it and have to do my hair again. These are the things that I factor in when I'm setting up my days
I'm
and being
sure
productive.
everyone listening to this could totally like.
Right?
It's actually funny. Like, so I'm also a yoga instructor. I haven't taught like since before COVID, but
Okay.
I used to tell like the people taking my class, I'm like, hate me now, love me later.
Yeah, 100%. I went to a body bar class yesterday at my yoga place, and I'm like, what are, and like we either use weights or body bands or like,
Yeah,
and I always say to the yoga instructor, I'm like, what instruments of torture are we using today?
Oh, for
But
sure.
it's definitely hurts so good and you do feel good. I feel strong. I feel like,
Yeah.
in the menopause, you lose muscle mass, right? So I want to make sure I don't have an elderly mom. And, I think what I do now is going to show up in 30 years. I don't do it to look hot. I do it so I can get up if I fall down and I can clip my own toenails in 30 years.
Yeah, and so I want to like unpack a bunch of this. So one, definitely my way to recharge too is with people, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, totally. And even what I do for a living is I'm with people all the time, right? Like even in the clinic, I'll see like 20 people in a day and I'll feel like pumped at the end of the day, right?
right.
Yeah, so totally that's a recharge. Awesome. So what you do for a living is in alignment with how you charge, and that's like a great alignment. So people listening to this, if you're the type of person that likes to have your alone time, like my best friend, she recharges alone, right?
Yes,
And so even sometimes if I'm really exhausted, I'll just go out hang out with her. And
right.
she's like, "Oh, you're in my zone today." And I'm like, "Yeah, I am."
Love
Right?
that.
But it's but even when she comes into my zone, like, but we have lots of respect for each other. Like I know if she wants to leave the party early or whatever, it's like, "All right, yeah, of course."
Yes,
And the next thing, the interesting thing about menopause, yeah, so menopause, like hot yoga, strength, all that stuff, it helps reduce a lot of things. So when people are like pissed, well, you got to do what you got to do to really secure your success with health, wellness, and all that stuff. So I get you. I I actually do love hot yoga. I'm not,
yeah.
you would be fun even the instructor, I can totally picture.
Oh, oh
I have
yeah,
a bunch of
yeah.
students that would be like that. Oh, how long are we here for?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Like when
rough.
they put the cold cloth on me at the end, I'm like, this is the only reason why I came today.
Yeah, yeah, it's so awesome. And
Yeah.
so, so if you were to, what would you want to leave people with? What would you love to share to encourage, or maybe something else that you do that people can model, or even just, I know that you're so relatable and when you're speaking and everything and engaging, what would you, I don't know, what little
I think,
nugget?
you know what? I just think, that relatable piece and like it's just because just do what works for you and like be you. And, it's that whole everyone else is taken. And and it's all going to shift a bit. Like sometimes I feel even as I'm getting a little bit older, now I'm like, oh, maybe I do want a little bit of alone time. Maybe I did like, whereas I wouldn't have maybe 10 years ago. And that's okay. Like your needs are going to shift. I mean, sometimes I look back and I'm like, how did I raise all those kids? And oh, like that was ridiculous. But it's kind of that thing, like, when you're in it, you just do it, you don't think about it. And then later you're like, what was that ridiculousness that I was doing? Right. So I think, things are going to shift and you're going to change and just go with the flow. But I would just be, if you're in the public eye a bit or if you're whatever, just be transparent about it, and I think as far as feeling good about yourself, you mentioned about communication on text and email, but even social media. If you're following people who make you feel not good about yourself or that you're less than, you know what, you can throw up a block or you can unfollow them. Like, curate your social media so that it's fun for you and that you enjoy it, because you don't want to, doom scroll all the time. That's just boring. And, again, you can control sort of the messages that are coming to you. And so if stuff isn't making you feel great, then don't do it.
hmm Yeah, that's actually the first thing I do with any client that's under the age of like 26. I'll put them in a room and I'll say unfollow anything that you feel like you're getting into judgment about.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I
and
love
I'll
that.
literally leave them in there and I'll tell them just
Yeah.
open the door when you're done. Right? But I'll do it in like a very, of course, like loving way. And they're
Yeah.
looking at it. It's almost like a sense of relief. Like, oh my God,
Yes.
I actually don't have to follow those people. Because I think there's also a little bit of a pressure of like their friends are following this person or somebody
Right.
told them to follow somebody. And then like, so it's this funky sort of space and time that we're in, which I know we're going to shift out of in some point in time.
Yeah.
But right now it's like, yeah, it's just,
I do love that because it gives them permission. I even find this with my youngest who's about to turn 16. Like, he doesn't bring his phone to school. And I think he kind of likes that rule because then, or like, I had a kid who their friends would always like message them for advice and stuff. And my kid really, they just don't really like that. Like, they're very like, they don't get sucked into anything, no drama. So like, a friend would text my parents this, and I had to, like, my kid was like, Mom, can I tell all my friends that you take my phone away at 8 o'clock? And I'm like, yes, let's take your phone away at 8 o'clock, because then they didn't have to answer. Like, throw me under the bus. I'm fine with it, but it reminds me of what you do, because sometimes they just need permission to like step away from some stuff. So, and it's okay. Like, let's help them with that. Right.
well, and the interesting thing that in the evening time, that even as adults and kids, everybody gets a little bored. So all
Right.
of a sudden, we have more time to be in here. And then all of a sudden, we're adding emotion to, they're thinking about, oh, should I have said this or shouldn't I have said that or should I have done this
Right.
or should I have done? So all of these things sort of like fizzle up after like 8 p.m. So that's
Yep.
a really good thing. So hey, if you're listening to this, just don't look at your phone after 8
Yeah,
p.m.
no good comes after 8
No.
p.m. We used to say in our younger years, Tree, we'd say nothing good happens when we're out after 2 a.m. Now we're saying 8 p.m.
Yeah, because on social, it's like, oh my gosh, you're too
And
available.
like, we've all had that experience too, how in the evening, and I mean, I've gone through this with kids so many times, where we catastrophize, right? Like, I remember like having conversations with kids and like they think something's a big deal. And I'm like, oh, it does sound like this is really big. Let's pick this conversation in the morning, but we're definitely going to problem solve this. And in the morning light, it
Yeah.
shrinks into almost, that's why I'm like, I'm not doing this right now, because you're making it such a big deal and it's not, right? Because your brain, like you say, your brain gremlins are telling you things.
Mhm.
So, if we can kind of de-escalate that by having the conversation in the morning when everybody's fresh and rested, and yeah, not in that kind of headspace, then things turn out a lot better.
Absolutely. It's totally different.
Yeah,
Totally different.
totally.
It's like trying to fight with your husband naked. It just can't happen.
Don't ever try that. You land with yourself with 6 kids.
You heard it here first, right? Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. So we're gonna have all of Julie's and Mabel's labels, like links and tags and all that social stuff. But again, thank you so much for your time. I know people are gonna learn so much off of this
Oh,
conversation.
Tree, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode of The Root of It All with Tree. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. But before we go, I just wanted to remind you that you can follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram. And we will be posting motivational quotes and behind the scenes content that you won't want to miss. You can always sign up to come live while we're filming this, or even join us online through Zoom. We always offer open question and answer after each episode that we don't record, so it's all private, but you can get more involved. So sign up for free at businessgrowthresults.com, and we're going to cover all kinds of different topics that you're not going to want to